Presentation. Video feed.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our session today. Countdown to Workday. Hot topics. Woohoo, yes. Hot topics and a peek of what's to come. We have today Sabrina Messer, our presenter. She works with as an administrative initiatives lead for AIP, Administration, Innovation, and Planning at UW-Madison, and she previously worked at DoIT, at School of Education, and Edgewood College. And she works with senior leaders throughout the campus to make sure that ensure administrative projects move forward successfully, adapting to changing stakeholder needs and resources available. She has worked in central distributed IT on campus and now supports HR, finance, and research administration. Sabrina holds undergrad and master's degree from UW-Madison and professional certifications that supports organizational change management. One of the asks that I have for you, please keep your questions at the end. We will have time for Q&A. If we don't get a chance to answer questions, you can pass it over to Sabrina, and hopefully you hear back. And with that, I pass the stage over to Sabrina.
People sit at tables in a conference room while a presentation is displayed on a large screen at the front.
Thanks, Al. I appreciate it. It's exciting and a little nerve-wracking to be back in the IT community. I've been, as Murnaz noted, kind of IT adjacent since 2023. So thank you all for showing up today to hear a little bit about what's coming. Again, for my gratitude, thank you to the conference committee for reaching out to ATP and asking for some more information to continue to build awareness and see what we're doing to just get the word out about all of the changes that are happening. Thank you to everyone in the room today, physically and virtually. It's just really cool to spend time. Okay, I'll figure out the buttons.
Slide agenda.
Hey, okay, there we go. We are coming to the close of a 6-year project. This started in May of 2019, if you're counting all the little bits and bobbles that have gone on. And now we're 38 days to go live, which gives me excitement and nerves at the same time to share with you. But many of us do have that counter up on our computers. Coming into the presentation, this is supposed to be about hot topics. And so when I checked in with some of my contacts on campus, I didn't actually hear a lot. That could be, again, because I've been out of the community for a while. It could also be user error, and I didn't get the good sample size. Either way, I do have a Google Doc available that should be shared in chat. Any questions you have, I know I'm not going to be able to answer them all today, but I do have a broad network of folks who can help me answer them for you. So these are some of the topics that did bubble up in questions from when I talked to folks about what could be of interest today. Okay.
Slide intended audience and expectation.
Just a note about audience and expectations, kind of a common disclaimer for some of the HTP presentations. This is for IT adjacent, folks who are supporting the HR and finance and RA users of Workday. They're really our primary users of the new tool. And so all of us are kind of helping them to do it as well as possible. This is a light touch on a lot of different topics and a lot of resource links. That was another thing that we were asked is, can you provide resources and links? So I do have free slides, lots of light reading for you after the presentation today. We're not doing training today. We're not getting deep into business processes. Back in 2024, last year, our HR and finance colleagues did a really deep dive into the business process configurations. We're not doing that today. Okay.
Slide Workday implementation goals.
One of the most common questions I hear, and the last hour is, why are we doing this? And this is one of my favorite slides because it's very aspirational. This is not what's going to happen on July 7th. This is not what's going to happen on January 1st of next year. This is what we're building toward and walking to. So I really do like the aspirational nature of this. Overall, this, again, 6-year project across all 13 universities, and HCM, finance, RA, not many universities have kind of done it all in one go, but that's what we're doing. Again, why this is aspirational. As we think about the sustainable piece on there, the ancillary systems, one of the reasons that there has been a bit of a push to retire those is it's really difficult to answer the question across all 13 universities of how many employees do we have? How many staff do we have? When we get those audits and we need to provide those numbers, it's been really challenging over time. And so that's part of the reason of trying to bring some of the systems together. Simplified processes. One of the biggest transformations, and I didn't realize it, is a lot of our HR and finance work has been transactional, and we're moving toward really a business process way of doing things. What that means, we have initiators and approvers in a process. We have handoffs between finance and HR where we didn't in the past. So really our functional colleagues are learning all new ways to do their work right now.
Slide, future state support.
When we think about future state support, there was actually a really robust presentation last week in ITCCC. A number of folks from Do It PPMO, and also from my unit presented to talk about what support would look like in future state. I didn't bring all those slides today. If you were at the meeting, great. If you know someone who was at the meeting, those slides are available. Todd's in the room. He can provide them as needed as well. So just want to really, really high level, if it has to do with Workday, the changes that are coming, anything attached to it, that's really going to go in Avanti. If it's a Do It support system, we interact with those now. We know how to do that. Those systems are still there, those processes, and there's going to be more robust ones as needed. And then if those of us in the local school, colleges, and divisions are supporting IT systems, we're going to use our usual support channels, again, for things that we're supporting. Training is another way that we're moving into support for future state. There's a lot of training by role. There's assigned security roles like expense data entry specialist, for example. It has like 3 courses that role has to take. Then we have our general ESS and MSS. One note here is that faculty do have courses to take. We have our PIs who have different roles now, and they will need to do more than they did in the past. For example, they'll need to approve high risk payroll transfers, for example. We know right now that Madison across the board is only at 10% training. So this is a data element that's being mentioned in a lot of different meetings. Across all of those assigned roles, we're only at 10%. We anticipate that's going to ramp up, but some of the leadership was kind of surprised to see such a low number right now. Okay. The training courses and the training tent that's available will be available through the fall. There may be some updates made in the fall. It may persist as is. Just noting this fact because we know we have faculty returning later in the summer, early in the fall. There is definitely consideration of those 9-month employees and how they're going to get their training.
Slide, access to data.
Data and reporting just is huge. The amount of areas that it touches in this project still kind of baffles me. So I have a combination of information on this slide. Again, just a really light touch to give some ideas of current state and future state. Most of my background is project management and change management. So a lot of what you're hearing is, here's how we're sharing information about this change. We're presenting current state and future state. We have different visuals to express this information. So just really quickly highlighting direct connections to our databases are going away. This is actually a common question that still comes up as recently as last week. Again, it's because our information just has to travel through so many people throughout the university. Info access today is available for analytic and reporting needs. Same situation in the future. The DAPR team is looking at those dashboards to make sure that they are current and have the appropriate data sources. So no direct database connections, what do we do? When we think about folks who need to look at data from like the last 3 years or current data, that really is going to be in Workday, and it's going to be either in a format of a dashboard. So like there's a PI dashboard, there's a manager dashboard. There's a variety of dashboards that bring the data together and display it for you by role. Then there's also the reporting tools built into Workday. Wiser to Workday crosswalks exist, and folks have tried to walk them with varying degrees of success. Not all data elements are in the reports that we anticipate them to be. Then if you actually need the data versus just a view of the data, or if you need data that's more than 3 years old, throwing in here our API infrastructure that we have using IICS, Person Finance, and I'm forgetting the third API. All of you know it, and I just blanked on it. And that's what I had to share on that one. Okay, barreling right through.
Slide, data validation.
Thinking about data validation, again, common questions that we've been getting as recently as this week. The data is stale. How am I going to validate that everything is set up correctly? Yes, the data is stale. There are no integrations to the old system. It's all happening through data conversion. The gold build is underway right now. And so the way this comes up in, for example, the finance community is our finance community wants to tie out reports. They want to make sure that the bottom line matches from current state to future state. That's really not possible where we are right now in the program and the conversion. So you could, for example, go back to a month that exists in SFS and has converted data in in Workday, and compare those two. But by and large, we're not seeing the ability to tie out right now. At a higher level, that's happening in some of our finance areas, but just want to call that out about how stale data is impacting different audiences for the program. And then just a note, yes, there is a small validation window right before general availability of go live to make sure your systems are receiving production data. Unfortunately, it's a vacation weekend. And so really consider carefully if your systems are critical enough that you need to validate over the weekend that you're getting that production data from downstream. Just quickly jumping back to when data will become stale after go live. HRS is going to have stale data as soon as July 1st. EPM, July 2nd, SFS, next fiscal year, and Wiser as well next fiscal year. Okay, Wiser, SF Martin, EPM will be decommissioned right now, anticipated July 31st, 2026.
Slide, UW-Madison data analysis sources.
Not going to say a lot to this slide. Again, kind of leaning on it as more of a project artifact. It's something that has been showed in recent months in like the Badger Data Network, for example, other places as ways to visualize the ways that we're going to get our data. I mentioned the Badger Data Network. There are more slides and more visuals to illustrate this in some of those box folders. And I have a link at the end for the network.
Slide, change impact work tags, a table.
Kind of jumping back to change management artifacts. We know our UDDS, or we can recognize it right now. It's just become kind of second nature, muscle memory. That's not the case in the future. And so one of the tools, if you will, that folks have been developing is like a cheat sheet or a checklist for you to have next to your computer for when you need to do purchasing or enter your expense reports, for example. When you're creating a report, there's a lot of different fields to fill in. And so, for example, our finance folks put this chart together to say roughly what is the corresponding piece of current state to future state. There is no one-to-one, so it's all approximations. By and large, UDDS is now organizations and work tags at a really high level. In a finance facilitator session last week on data and reporting, that's one of the ways that the finance community is supporting their members. One of our Department of Business Services team members walked through the Wiser to Workday crosswalk, and one of the opening comments was, I never thought I would remember the program code that I need to start this. But it's been a couple months, and sure enough, that individual remembers it just like they remembered UDDS. So we will develop that muscle memory, but going into July 7th, really having a cheat sheet next to you, understanding what your codes are so that you can do what you need to do in Workday.
Slide, change impact all managers, includes student managers, a table.
I realize some folks are managers, but not all folks are managers. Again, this is one of those artifacts we're using to try and communicate changes for that particular role. I know a lot of folks in the IT community manage students. One question that came up is, will students be using Workday? Kind of an assumption that students will not be using Workday at all, which is not true. If a student is an employee, they will be managing their time off in Workday, and you as their supervisor will be approving that time in Workday. Student records will remain in SIS. That's not changing. But again, student employees, really any employee, will be doing some aspect of their work in Workday, whether it be just to check your balances, clock time off, things like that.
Slide, other hot topics.
So just sort of the random grab bag of other things that came up as I was preparing for today. AI is a hot topic everywhere, understatement of the year. We're not currently launching Workday with many AI capabilities, actually at all. That's just because we want to be mindful of our data, be mindful of stewards of the software. There are definitely capabilities that are being examined right now, and I know that in last year's Workday Rising, Illuminate was announced. There were just some recent revisions to that product in May. We also know about some of the news articles right now for some of these software, and so just again, we're not using AI out the gate. What am I going to see in my UW? There will be Workday tiles there, basically, that replace what you see now for HRS and SFS. Just want to touch lightly on that. I am not a representative of that service team. It's an amazing service team. Just wanted to call out that, yes, you will see Workday tiles there. Professional development, it's a wild future. Continuous improvement mindset, and I say it that way because I think we're all adept at change controls and doing the tech side of change. But what I'm talking about in terms of continuous improvement mindset and organizational change management is thinking about the human side of things. How do we work with those around us to realize maybe there's a new feature that could help them replace something that they're doing manually? How do we help folks examine ancillary systems, looking at the new releases, twice-year releases for Workday, to see if anything new came up that might help, to see if their familiarity with the system has increased enough to use more features of it, for example. So again, trying to think in those ways of how can we identify potential improvements, how can we be sensitive to the human toll that change is, excuse me, and just really continue to work toward that goal slide that I showed. What if security roles are incorrectly mapped at go live? They will be incorrectly mapped at go live. As we've talked to other universities, this is the top thing that happens. We do our best in a vacuum to map roles, and when it goes live, we realize because of notifications or business processes that haven't completed that we didn't get it quite right. One interesting thing here is entering into the HR and finance space, no one really had a sense of role-based access control, which kind of is what security role mapping is. And so it was hard to translate the transactions that folks were doing today to an approver or initiator role in some business process that they're not familiar with. So we've had a lot of rounds of security role mapping. It will go right up until the end of June. And then there is a business process built into Workday to adjust roles after go live. There are approvers for those requests throughout the university and at Central. So we definitely have things in place to make sure we can get that cleaned up quick. We're also looking at different rapid response teams focused on security role mapping because that is just such a known challenge right after go live.
Slide, helpful links.
Okay, now comes all of the slides of helpful links. I will just briefly mention, I have some resources from Madison. I have some resources from the universities of Wisconsin, training resources. Workday Community is an interesting one too, if you really want to engage and see what's happening on that side and that's not filtered through our particular implementation. Again, the future state support, the Avanti is going to be the end result for so many people. So I did note the general help website and then the Avanti user portal.
Slide, more helpful links.
Okay. More specific Workday knowledge. A lot of these links complement that data and reporting space and have been shared out by like Lonnie Morgan and other folks in that data and reporting space as they're talking to users. So nothing really new there. Again, a blend of things from campus and from ATP. I will call out though the first link, approval actions in Workday. That's one of our ways to double check and make sure business processes are happening. There is a way for us to look in Workday and see if a process is stuck, if an approver hasn't completed their step, maybe they're on vacation. There are ways to look at that. Again, this is really nice for our HR and finance users who have to work more cross-functionally on things like hiring or payroll adjustments where they haven't had to do that today. So again, I would recommend checking out the approval actions in Workday. Ancillary systems, resources that y'all have seen. Again, being asked for links, I had to put the standard go-tos, the UDS guidance, and then some responsibilities. I did call out here in the keep systems disposition section, there's some really interesting key links there.
Slide.
And my last slide of links, more on reporting and the crosswalks that are there, a little bit about EAP, and then I did include the address for the website for the Badger Data Network. So again, that's where some of the slides I took came from.
Slide, thank you and questions.
Thank you so much for bearing with me for that. Again, it's exciting to be back in the community. I know I've been out for a while. Happy to entertain questions. Confident I'm not going to be able to answer them all, but thank you for your time and attention.
We have a few minutes for questions. For folks online, I shared a link in the chat. Please use that to post your questions so that in case we don't get to your question or we don't know the answer today, we can get back to you. Thank you.
Hey, Sabrina, welcome back.
Oh, hi, Jen.
Hey, a question for you. You talked about security role mapping. For those in the IT community here in this room, who are those who are joining us online and from other universities, what should they do if someone comes to them and says, I don't have access, but I really should? Or the flip side of that, I have access to something that I really don't think I should. What should us as an IT community, both here in Madison, as well as those joining us from around the state, what should we do?
Sure. I'm going to be a bit of a broken record. Avanti is probably the best place to start. There are a lot of local resources, though, when we think about security role mapping was done by our HR senior staff and our finance senior staff throughout school, colleges, and divisions. So a first stopping point might be, can you check in with the HR director or finance director in your unit? Because in all likelihood, they set those role mappings, and so there'd be more information there. Ultimately, when we need to get into like troubleshooting, that's going to be Avanti, and also the tickets of, I think I was mapped incorrectly. Again, if there's a role that you think you should have, there is a business process in Workday for that. I can get that information to you all as follow-up for this session. Thanks. I know I'm in between you and lunch, so I'm totally not offended if we want to go.
I just have a quick question. You said the training tenant's only available through the fall. Will there be Canvas courses and stuff like that for new hires or staff turnover or change in roles? Will those be available?
Yep, absolutely. Training materials are definitely going to be available. The job aids, the courses, recordings of some of the courses that were run. Local Madison OHR and Department of Business Services have some office hours and trainings as well. What is going to go away is the training tenant. So for folks who heard of UXT last year, the training tenant is basically the UXT tenant. And so it was maintained basically to support training. And candidly, not everyone has access to the training tenant based on your hire date or change date. Just based on the data conversion again. So not everyone has access to it right now. It will only be available for a period of time into the fall, but all the other training resources will persist. Oh boy.
Is this on? Yes.
Yes.
All right. Again, thanks, Sabrina. Know that this is very timely because it's coming in, 38 days. Is that right?
Yep,
Okay.
38 days.
Not specifically a question, but just kind of like a tie-in for even some of the stuff Lois mentioned this morning about, like, if I see it as a solved problem, like why you got the questions of why are we doing this? It just means that that's not like, you're not close enough to the thing that's actually going to get better. And just to keep that in mind. And then obviously there's a whole bunch that, again, that Lois even mentioned this morning about like, hesitance to change, but also that we're going to need to go with the flow with this. It's not going to be perfect. Remember, everybody else is human. This is also not the worst thing that's going to happen to you today or this week. And don't let it mess up your mental health, we'll say.
Yep, absolutely. One of the things that we've shared in different campus forums at the school, college, and division level is grace and space. Everybody is learning something new about this thing, regardless of where they are in Workday or the Workday ecosystem. And it's just really exciting to hear so many different folks throughout HR, finance, leadership, RA that are like, yep, we're not going to get it right. We're going to learn, we're going to get it right. But July 7, day one, have grace and space for folks. Yes, not just July 7th, all of the days following that.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. I don't want to block people from lunch, but it was great. Thank you very much for joining us today. There are many other sessions. Please join those. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.